viewers to Life on the Level. Just had a fantastic first presentation on employment with balanced conditions. What a treat now. We've got our very own Professor Andrew Hugill, who is a member and a major contributor to what we do with the support group. Very busy guy. He's just launched a new course at Leicester University. He's also credited with co-creating the world's first balance spectrum, which anyone who's not seen it is well worth having a look at. The link is on our website, and you can see all of the balance conditions for the first time ever put on one page, and it's fully interactive, and you can see symptoms and other very good information about various balance conditions. Today, Andrew is not going to talk about his professional life. What he's going to do instead is share with us the personal challenges of living with his balance condition. So really appreciate what Andrew is doing, sharing this with us privately in this room and with a few billion people out there on Facebook. So well done, Andrew. But over to you, Andrew, and thank you very much for coming in this presentation. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I'll just let Kevin turn the lights off first. Hooray, that's better. So yes, I think the key word in the title of this presentation is personal. As Kevin has said, I'm not going to be talking much at all about my professional life. This is about my experiences with Menieres disease and other related conditions, or not so related conditions. So it is very much a personal account, so it's going to get pretty intimate, I think. So I don't know if people remember the TV series Columbo, but if you remember Columbo, at the start of it, the audience was, or the viewer, was given the identity of the murderer, and then the fun was watching the detective figure out who it was. And of course, we knew all along, but Peter Falk, who played Columbo, was a great actor, and it was just wonderful to watch him do this. So I thought I'd structure this talk the same way, because the idea is that I offer you some, I don't know whether it's advice really, but just my insights into how I've dealt with this condition. So this is, as it were, the conclusion, and then the fun for you is going to be watching me reach this conclusion. So 4 things to say. This is my way of dealing with adversity. The first thing is research. So, I mean, I'm a professor, so that's what we do anyway, but I think for everybody, you know, we have the tools at our disposal to research. And why research the conditions that we have? Because we want to understand as much as we can about the situation we're in and what we're going through. Then enlist support, both human and technological. My gadgets have already been mentioned, and I'll talk some more about them in a minute, so I'll deal with the technology side. But on the human side, of course, this is crucial. I'm sure everybody in the room can relate to this. You know, I've been very fortunate. I have had a fantastic support. I do find with support, it says enlist support as though somehow, you know, everything comes my way. But of course, support is a two-way process. You know, you have to give back in order to receive. So it's that exchange which is really important. Now, this one may be a bit controversial. Accept constraints. As an artist, I'm an artist as well as a scientist. I like to work with constraints, and I find them quite productive. And in fact, anybody who's written poetry, for example, and written, you know, a haiku or a sonnet, you know about the rules of that form, and the same in music, because I'm a composer. So I find constraints can be quite creative. And what I mean here by accept constraints is to do with the constraints imposed upon you by your condition. So I find myself that the best way forwards for me is to accept the situation I'm in, and then to find ways of being creative with that. Which leads on to the the final thing, find opportunities in that situation. And that means having a positive mental attitude. And if there's one takeaway from this talk that I want to give everybody, it's positive mental attitude, because, you know, that will see you through such a lot, and it's so important to maintain that. I put a disclaimer at the bottom. Your moves may vary, which is an old Usenet slogan to acknowledge that actually I've just said what I've just said, and then for all I know, you're all sitting there going, well, that's not how I see it. You know, that's not the way I think of it. You know, actually that doesn't relate to me. That's fine. That's I've been asked to speak, and I'm going to tell you my way of doing things and my approach to this, and it's up to you whether or not this relates to you. And I'm not saying mine is the only way by any means. Okay, so that's the conclusion. Now I'm going to start the talk. So I should just sort of explain who I am, my career a little bit. So currently I'm Professor of Creative Computing at the University of Leicester. Before that I directed a course with or a programme with a similar title and a research centre at Bath Spa University. And then before that I was at De Montfort, and I was actually at De Montfort for nearly 30 years. I started off in the music department, which I eventually ran, and then set up a music technology department, and then eventually became the director of something I founded called the Institute of Creative Technologies, which is still going on. I've listed some publications. If anybody's interested, you can visit my website and see my publications, but I've written various books and articles and chapters. This is what professors do, okay? There are 3 projects that I'm currently working on that may be of interest to people here. The balance disorder spectrum has already been mentioned. That project is constantly being updated and under review as new approaches, new ideas come in. I'm in the process of preparing a bid to create an artificial intelligence to diagnose balance disorders. And I'm working with a team of scientists and IBM and Peter Ray, who will be known to many people here, and others on that project. And then there's a project called Oral Diversity, which is about people hearing differently, particularly musicians. And I'm interested in whether you can make music that explores the differences in hearing between people and allow people who hear differently to enjoy music by listening in different ways. Okay, so that's the most I'm going to say about the professional side. Right. So, 2007, I was sat in my studio composing one day, and suddenly the world did that. And it did it really fast and really violently for quite a long time. And of course, I'm sure, I'm seeing nods in the room, I'm sure people recognise this. And of course I had no idea what was going on, and thought, as you do, maybe I shouldn't have had that extra pint last night, maybe I've got a virus, maybe this, maybe that. Okay, so it stops, and then you think, all right, you carry on. A few weeks later, same thing happened. A few weeks after that, same thing happens again. I'm starting to think, okay, there's something seriously wrong here. So I go to the GP, who says, oh, it's labyrinthitis. You've got a virus. Here's some Stemetil that will, it'll take a little while, it'll stabilise you, and you'll be fine. So I took the Stemetil, and of course it did nothing. And so I had still more vertigo, and now I started to notice my hearing going. I was professor of music at this time, and I think, okay, this doesn't feel like a virus to me. Back to the doctor, same thing. Oh, it's a virus. Just rest, drink lots of water. Basically, they don't know how to diagnose balance disorders. I mean, that's the long and short of it. It's too fuzzy, it's too difficult. And what are you describing? What's the language you use to describe these conditions? You know, I'm dizzy, I'm giddy. These words are a bit kind of vague. What do they really mean? So anyway, eventually I changed doctors, because I just thought, this guy doesn't get it. And the next doctor said, Good news, in Leicester we have a balance clinic, and you should go and see Professor Ray at the balance clinic. So that's where I went. And by this stage I'd already done the research. So by the time I arrived in his surgery, I was already convinced that I had Menieres disease, because I could just see all the symptoms. So I had the oral fullness, I had the tinnitus, I had the hearing loss with low end frequencies going first. That's very characteristic of Menieres. And of course the vertigo. So I went and saw him, and he took half an hour to figure out or to confirm what I already suspected, that it was Menieres. And then of course the next thing you want to know is it unilateral or bilateral? Well, mine is pretty obvious it was bilateral, in that although the right ear was much worse than the left ear, they were both going down. And you can see on the right here, this is an audiogram from 2017, so it's actually a bit worse now than it was. But this is the right ear, because audiologists do everything back to front, so the right ear is on the left and the left ear is on the right. So the right, you can see, this is normal hearing, 10, that line there, and that's where my right ear hearing is, and you can see it's kind of a mess really. And then this left ear hearing is also quite well down, apart from this little area here, which is normal, and that is the area of human speech, conveniently. So actually, even if I don't wear my hearing aids, I can actually hear what people say to me, although it's not great, but I can hear it, which is my one salvation, I think, in all of this. And you can see the top end of the hearing is well down there as well, which may be age-related, because everybody's hearing declines from the age of about 20, you know, so as I'm 62 now, so as you get older, you know, your hearing just declines anyway. So I then went through a series of treatments, culminating, and I'm going to say more about the treatments in a minute, but culminating in intratympanic gentamicin injections. What that is an injection directly into the inner ear of gentamicin, which is a very powerful antibiotic. And what that does is to destroy the balance function in the ear chemically. So it's a chemical labyrinthectomy, basically. So I have no balance function at all in my right ear. Why does that, you know, I'm standing here so I can stand up. Why do that? It's destructive. Is because the vertigo was so severe. I mean, I'm talking about attacks lasting 5 hours, 3 times a week, basically. That's where I was at. The destruction of the balance function relieved the vertigo, and that's why I can stand in front of you now. It's quite comical, really, because if we put all the lights out and it's dark outside and I try and walk, I just fall over like that. So I need to see to balance. That's how I walk around. And then we have, of course, the hearing loss, which I've already talked about. Tinnitus. Show of hands, how many people in the room have tinnitus? Oh, look at that. Almost everybody. So you'll all know what that's like. In Menieres, it fluctuates constantly, hour by hour, day by day. It's unpredictable, and I've got it in both ears. At the moment, I have a thing that sounds a bit like a lawnmower going on in this ear, and something that sounds like someone leaning on a Moog synthesizer top end in the other ear. Okay, but probably by tonight it will have changed. Oral fullness, this is the sensation of pressure in the ear coming from fluid inside the inner ear. I don't have that so much now, actually. That seems to have dissipated over time. And then this thing, diplocusis. Have people heard of this, diplocusis? Okay, diplocusis is, the full technical term is interaural pitch difference. And what it means is that if you play a note on the piano, I hear 2 different notes. One of them out of tune from the other. So my right ear hears a note that is flat compared to the left ear. And what's more, it varies in out of tunedness from note to note. So it's not a predictable detuning. Which means if you now if I play a piece of Bach or Mozart, it just sounds like Stockhausen, you know. Which is kind of groovy, but not quite what you want, really. So I spend a lot of time grappling with this in my artistic work, trying to figure out ways of dealing with it. And I built an instrument actually called the Diplacusis piano that reproduces what I actually hear. I mean, I gave a concert with this instrument last week. Obviously, the piece is very short because it's quite painful to listen to, and I don't want to make other people hurt. But I do think that this is this business of trying to find a creative opportunity within the condition. So I look at this and I think, okay, this is my hearing. I could just ignore it and write dots on paper where I can imagine what that sounds like and give it to musicians who have normal hearing who can then play that. And I can't hear it properly, but everybody else could, or maybe not the people in this room, but a lot of other people could. But then I think, no, actually I'm really interested in this Diplacusis. It's painful, it's uncomfortable, but it is me, and I want to try and investigate that. So I write music that investigates this. Okay, and then there's another diagnosis that I had 2 years ago, and this, I mean, this is a completely different kettle of fish in a way, but it overlaps, which is autism. So I was diagnosed with what used to be called Asperger's syndrome. You're not allowed to call it Asperger's syndrome anymore. I don't know whether people are familiar with this, but Asperger, whose name is given, turns out to have been a Nazi who was responsible for sending all his patients to the gas chambers. So obviously the community who named it after Asperger have gone, actually, we'll just call it autism now. So autism is a kind of a spectrum, and there are many different variants of it. It's a lifelong condition. It's not an illness. I mean, that's crucial. It is a neurodivergence. What it means is basically my brain is wired differently to the majority of brains in this room. I mean, for all I know, you're all autistic too, but probably not. And in practical terms, what does that mean? That means I've always had social challenges, understanding situations or reading situations with other people, knowing what facial body language, facial expressions mean. I find unstructured interactions difficult. So this is great, I talk, you listen, it's very, very clear, and I've done it thousands of times, and I'm quite happy with that, and you can ask questions or make comments, whatever. That's all fine, but if we then go and have tea, and the fun bit later, I don't like that. That I find quite difficult. And then big environmental and sensory issues. So I have problems with lighting, which is why I'm so pleased that Kevin has turned these lights off, because fluorescent tubes do my head in. I have problems with sounds, and I've always had problems with those. This is partly why I ended up working in music, because my hearing was so much more acute than other people's. I was hearing details. We used to do oral tests, and the teacher would play a chord on the piano and say what notes are in that chord. And the problem I had was that I could hear the lighting as well, mixed in with the chord. So I was going, well, it's complicated. You've got a D tune G in your C major chord. Is the piano out? Or, it's like that. I was hearing detail that other people don't hear. And then smells as well. I'm very sensitive to smell. When you go to the toilet here in the next door bit, there's a sort of lobby area. I opened that, and it's the only place on this racecourse that smells of horses. And you think everywhere would smell of horses, because the one thing you'll find on a racecourse is horses, but no, it's just in this little lobby area. Have they put a horse in there, or, I mean, what is it? So, I don't know. And then unusual behaviours, routines. So I'm very driven by routines, and I perform the same tasks over and over again. Stimming, which is basically self-stimulation. I have little toys like this, which I twiddle with. I used to bite my nails a lot, and this stops me doing that. I used to have bleeding fingers the whole time. And then generally, eccentricity. My mother said I was born eccentric, and it kind of went downhill from there, really. So there you are, an autistic professor. What a cliche. Oh, and anxiety. So the anxiety is there with the Menieres, and it's there with the autism. But as you can tell, no learning difficulties, no normal speech, and masking is just the ability to be able to appear normal with people who aren't autistic, which I'm pretty good at doing, I think. I'm never quite sure if I've succeeded, but generally I think I manage. So not an illness, a neurodivergence. Right, so with that in mind, here we go, treatments and therapies. So there's a whole list of them. When you get Menieres, you know, this is the thing you find. You've got loads and loads of treatments and therapies to deal with. First one is you have to change your diet. So low salt, meaning under 2 milligrams a day. I stuck to that. Well, I'm autistic, so you would. I practically counted the grains out, you know. I mean, it was on that kind of level. And I've been really, really good at doing that. And now I don't have to worry so much, fortunately. So the disease sort of burns itself out a bit as it goes on, and I find that I can eat more salt now without any ill effects. Caffeine, though, I just don't take it. I stopped taking it in 2009 when I was diagnosed, and I've never taken it again. And fairly recently I've become gluten-free because I've had stomach problems all my life. My wife said to me, why don't you try a gluten-free diet? I tried it for 24 hours, and lo and behold, the stomach problems just went away. So I don't know what's going on there, probably some nutritionist can explain it, but it works for me. So like a lot of people, I imagine I was pretty sceptical that this was a real thing, and then it turns out it is. But then loads of autistic people have this problem apparently. Allergies, I always have masses of allergies. Cats, can't be in the same room as them. Hay fever, perfume. Is this autistic or is this allergy? I don't know, but perfume. So Hugill's gadgets, which I'll go through as we go. A personal air purifier, which I wear around my neck whenever there's a problem with perfume. I was wearing it earlier because a few people are wearing perfume today. Psychological treatments and therapies. So now, I'm going to try not to offend anybody here. Mindfulness and meditation I have tried on a number of occasions, and basically it's torture, as for me. Because what it asks you to do is to be in the moment and to become aware of what's around you. Yeah? Now, for an autistic person, that is the worst thing you can do, because it's like total sensory overload. So I've actually spent a lot of time trying to avoid mindfulness and finding other ways of getting past this. So sorry for all the mindfulness people, and I'm sure it works for lots of people, it just doesn't for me. Counselling, tried a little bit of it, it's all right, but to be fair to the counsellors, they didn't know I was autistic, because neither did I. So, and they didn't figure it out from talking to me, which was a bit surprising, really, because I would have done. But anyway, to be fair to them, so I don't think they made too much headway. Hypnotherapy I did find was quite effective, and I went to a proper hypnotherapist, trained hypnotherapist, you know, not a quack. And I'd give it a go if you're that way inclined. But generally, psychological treatments I've not found terribly good, probably because my brain's different. Drugs. Circ, do people know Circ? This is beta-histidine. The dosage on Circ, the given dosage on Circ maximum is a total fiction. And actually you can take double, triple the amount of dose quite safely, and I have done, and it does help. But I found that taking a vast amount of it was the only way to really get it to have an effect. Diuretics, well, obviously that's about expelling fluid from the body. I did that for a while. It did help, but it didn't stop the vertigo. Stemetil I mentioned. Bucostem is like Stemetil, but you put it under your tongue, and the idea is that it stops you vomiting when you're having a vertigo attack. And it's kind of instant effect. It never actually stopped me vomiting, but I think it reduced the amount of vomiting that I was doing, which was good because, I mean, you know, 5 hours of vomiting, I mean, you're basically bringing up bile, you know, and it really hurts to vomit that much. Seasickness pills, similar. Electrolytes. So if you take Circ, for example, there's the branded Circ, SERC, and then there's beta-histidine, which is the NHS sort of, you know, equivalent. They're made with mixed with different electrolytes. That's to say that the pills have, you know, they've got things that bind them and make them into pills that are different. And I found that I could get on with the Circ, but I couldn't get on with the standard beta-histidine. And people need to be aware of this, because I think this does affect balance. Surgery, so I had one piece of actual surgery where somebody gives you an anaesthetic and goes in with a knife, which was to insert a grommet into my right ear, which did relieve pressure, actually. And I wore it for about 10 years, and now it's been removed, but I have a hole permanently in my ear, which obviously I have to then guard against when I'm showering, because you can't get water into the inner ear. So I have an ear mold that I wear. But it's great on flights, because you don't experience that horrible, because you just got a hole in your ear, so it just doesn't contract and expand. And then the gentamicin, I called it surgery, but it's not really surgery, it's drugs, but it's kind of the same thing, because the way they would have done it in the past would have been to take a scalpel and cut your labyrinth out physically. Now I still have a labyrinth in there, but it just doesn't do anything. Vestibular rehabilitation exercises I found completely useless. After the gentamicin, I was put on a course of these. Bless him, Andrew Clements did a grand job of teaching you how to do the exercises, and being autistic, I did them religiously every day, as rigorously as I could. And basically, they just gave me vertigo attacks the whole time. So I don't know quite what was going on there. Much better was the Wii Fit. If people know the Wii Fit, it's you have a balance board and you play sports on the TV. It's a video game, basically. And I found that was great. But the best thing of all was living on a narrowboat. Because you would think, now this is totally counterintuitive, you would think that a person with a balance disorder, the last thing they would want to do is live on a boat, right? Because the floor moves all the time. But it really worked for me. Why? Because this is my amateur theory. I think my brain was being trained by my boat to constantly adjust. Now, in the last couple of months, we've actually moved into a house in Market Harborough. We've come off the boat, and I've noticed that my balance is worse since I moved into the house. So I'm not recommending that everybody moves onto a narrowboat. Remember my disclaimer, I'm telling you how I do it, and you can figure it out for yourselves. Alternative therapies are pretty well all rubbish. I looked at various online cures. They were all dreadful. Most of the people wanted lots of money and tried to impress me with loads of gobbledygook. Well, you can imagine how that went down with me. I impressed the hell out of them back. Herbal remedies, don't go there, is my advice. I took them for a while. They just gave me more vertigo and didn't seem to do anything, really. Chinese medicine, I mean, well, I do remember having a vertigo attack while lying on a slab covered in needles in central Leicester, thinking, what do I do now? I can't get up and go to the loo because, I've got all these needles. I mean, there are needles through my whole body, in my toes, my ears, everywhere, Anyway, that was a bit of a nightmare, so it didn't work for me. And massages, I found massages quite pleasant and helped with relaxation. I tried sports massage because I thought that would be more, it would get, deeper, and all it did was just give me a back problem, so I wouldn't recommend that either. However, technology, absolutely. Now this is where it gets cool as far as I'm concerned. My hearing aids are brilliant. They're ReSound Links Quattro. They're controlled by an app. Oh God, I'm running out of time. And I can adjust them depending on the situation I'm in using the app. I wear noise-cancelling headphones, which every autistic person carries with them anyway, but I find I can wear these with a mini mic, which streams directly to my hearing aid. So last night, my brother and I went to a restaurant in central London. It was extremely noisy. All night I wore the headphones, and then I gave him this microphone that then streamed what he was saying into my hearing aids. So I didn't hear the surrounding noise. The result is my tinnitus is okay today, whereas it probably would have been awful if I hadn't had them. And I had a good conversation with my brother too, so that was fine. Clip-on shades, I put these on when there's fluorescent lighting and in other bright situations. Personal air purifier I've mentioned. This time of year, head torch, really important for walking. If you've got balance, great piece of kit. And then this, which I've shown before here, but I gather some people don't know about it. This is the Sunflower Lanyard scheme, and this is for people with invisible disabilities. So you can wear this. Now, I was told earlier that Tesco's have now started this, Sainsbury's do it, and most airports do it. And what it means is you'll get help and assistance and understanding from people who've been trained to recognise the lanyard and assist you. And I really recommend this, it's great. What else have I missed there? Oh, a tinnitus relief app is on my phone. Under pillow speaker, so at night, because I can't sleep because of the tinnitus, my good ear is pressed to a speaker that then plays talk radio to me, because I can't listen to music anymore because of the diplexiosis. So I listen to Radio 4 or Radio 5 Live at night, and it gets me off to sleep. Neti pot. A neti pot is a thing with, you put salted water and you put it in your nose and it does nasal irrigation. You have to tilt your head, which is a bit scary. So if you don't like that, there's something called Sterimar, which you can buy in the chemist, and it just squirts up your nose. And it clears out the sinuses, which is great if you have allergies like I do. Coping strategies. So, well, the first one everybody does, of course, is you go online. So, often useless, sometimes terrifying, and frequently wrong, is my prognosis about going online. However, there is some good information out there if you spend the time and cut through all the rubbish. The uselessness is because you just have often just bad quality information. It's either inaccurate, out of date, or just comes from some opinion, or is trying to drive you towards some kind of solution that usually involves parting with cash. Terrifying because you just read loads and loads of accounts of people whose lives are over. You know, they basically, all they've got is online, and they're just saying, you know, my life is terrible, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And this really, it builds up psychologically, reading these accounts. I mean, they're really, you know, heart-wrenching. And I would urge caution, because there's only so much of that, reading that stuff that you can take. And then quackery, I've mentioned already, people trying to flog you things. There are online support groups. I found them kind of quite good at times, but a bit mixed. I tended to latch on to one or two people and ignore everybody else, because you get a lot of people just basically trying to stir up trouble for whatever reason. But you can usually figure out who the good people are. And then for me, I told you it was personal, this, structure and routines. No matter how bad I was, the autism program dictated that I get back to the routine as soon as possible. And that is just the way I've really dealt with it, you know, is just having a structure, knowing that tomorrow morning, however bad I am now, tomorrow morning I've got to get up and I've got to cook my 2 eggs and my 2 pieces of toast with the Frank Cooper's marmalade, which depends on the season, whether I have the light or the traditional. So right now it's traditional because it's winter time. And so on and so on and so on. This endless set of routines that I have, and that just drove me forwards. And you may not be autistic, and you're saying, well, I can't do that. But actually, if you have some kind of structure and routine, I find it really does help. You don't always achieve it every day, but at least you've got something to aim for. And then determination. I mean, this is just being bloody minded, basically. You know, you've just got to be determined and carry on, because you know, things are difficult, but you know, yeah, you have to just focus on the positives. Avoiding tiredness. I find this very hard to do, and I mean, this is partly an autistic thing, because you tend to lose energy as you go through the day. But I think everybody who has a balance problem finds they get tired. And when you get tired, you get into a cycle. You know, the tinnitus gets worse, the balance gets worse, and then you feel tired because it's got worse, and you go round and round and round, and you start to spiral down. So I think working on avoiding tiredness is a project, and trying to structure things so that you avoid tiredness. You know, so take afternoon naps, etc. I mentioned the Sunflower Lanyard scheme. The Menieres Society were helpful, and the National Autistic Society, and they both issue cards, so I'm able If I can't speak in a situation for some reason, which happens from time to time, I can show someone a card that tells them what they're dealing with. If you have an attack in public, what you don't want is someone to call an ambulance, because they then don't know what they're dealing with, and you're usually in some nightmare scenario with flashing lights and fluorescent tubes and people shouting, and that's the opposite of what you want. So if you have a card, and I actually went at the height of the Menieres, made one of my own as well that I would just give to people that said, I am having a vertigo attack. I can't speak right now, but if you leave me alone, I will be able to speak in perhaps an hour or two from now. And I used that several times on stations with members of the public who were very sweet and concerned, and read my card and took appropriate action when they saw it. So thanks for those people out there who did that. Vertigo, so I mentioned the vomiting. Brain fog is another thing you have after you've had a vertigo attack. Your brain feels like it's wrapped in cotton wool, and then attacks in public. So how do you deal with that? Well, my wife, who has been wonderful, she would just give me a blanket and some water and just leave me to it. We had an ensuite bathroom, and I got very familiar with the toilet. I know I can visualise every detail of that toilet bowl, and it's all white, so that takes some doing. But that's the approach really. Keep them warm, because after you start off sweating and then you get cold, and it really gets uncomfortable. Have something comfortable on the floor, some water, because you lose a lot of fluid, and you just have to wait it out. We had to make some adjustments. She and I stopped sleeping together, because I needed to sleep immediately the attack was over, or preferably before it was over, so that I could get away from it. And I didn't like the fact that the illness might prevent her from sleeping. So my need to go, do whatever I did might prevent her. And then finally, motion in the bed. I couldn't take that. Even the slightest motion would set me off. White card trick. This is a good one if you're having a vertigo attack. Just get a piece of plain white card and hold it in front of your eyes. It stops the nystagmus. So nystagmus is when your eyes start to do this, or this, or a bit of this. If you put the white card in front, you've got nothing for the eyes to look at, and that often helps. And then if I was out and about, my wife would come and pick me up in the car. Fortunately, she could do that because she was self-employed. And I also, for a brief period, this is very unusual for an academic, I actually had a PA. This is when I was directing the Institute of Creative Technologies. And so she knew about my problems, and so quite frequently she would hold people at the door who'd come to see me, and I would be in the office throwing up in the waste paper bin while she fended them off. So she was great, and I kept this whole thing secret, for 10 years. I only started talking about all of this 2 years ago. And the reason I kept it secret was what we were talking about earlier, fear. Professional fear. I just thought, people know I've got a hearing problem, a balance problem, they're going to think I can't do my job properly. I had a very high-powered, high-pressured job, and I wanted to be as on top of that as I could. So, how am I doing for time? Okay. So, autism versus Menieres. Now, this is what I've been grappling with. What's the autistic bit and what's the Menieres bit, and what is the overlap? So, the first thing to say is that both the diagnoses are unequivocal. There's no doubt about them. But obviously, Menieres is a physical thing. You can actually measure it. You can see the audiogram, you can observe the vomiting, you can see the nystagmus of the eyes. Whereas autism, well, it's a bit hard, isn't it? It's a judgment call by psychologists. You answer hundreds of questions, you're interviewed at great length, and then they say, yes, you're autistic. So it's a physical versus a mental thing. So we a couple of years ago went on holiday to Norway. Had a wonderful time going down from north of the Arctic, north of the near the Arctic, and down the coast all the way to Trondheim on boat, because I like boats. But the flight out I got into this terrible state. So, you know, I haven't had a proper vertigo attack for quite a few years. We're sat in the waiting room, the departure lounge, me and my wife, and suddenly I start having a vertigo attack. And I feel like I'm about to be sick, you know, I sort of stagger off to the toilet, and then I'm in there for about 20 minutes. No vomiting, but feeling like it, really kind of going. My wife texted me and she said, the plane's about to leave, you've got to decide, are we on it or not? So I said, okay, we're on it. And I staggered out, got hold of her shoulder, staggered down, you know, and then the poor chap next to me on the plane, you know, as I sat there with my head in a bag, you know, sick bags, another very important gadget, by the way, his head in a sick bag, and he's sitting there thinking, oh God, this guy's gonna, you know. Anyway, after about 20 minutes in the air, I was all right. Right, what happened there then? So, you know, I initially blamed, I'd had a Subway, not Subway, pret-a-manger baguette with some prawns in it, and I thought, oh, I know what, too much salt, you know, must have had too much salt. That must have been Menieres, you know. And in the past, if I'd eaten that amount of salt, it would have immediately caused a vertigo attack. But that doesn't really add up. Now this time, I hadn't had the autism diagnosis. Now I've had the diagnosis, I look back and I think, no, something else is going on here. I can't go through an airport as an autistic person. I mean, it terrifies me. It throws me into a total spin, and I just melt down in insecurity. And frequently I've got stuck, because I fly quite a bit. Frequently got stuck, standing in security, unable to move, paralysed with just overwhelmed, you know. And I think what happened was, because my wife was with me, normally I go on my own, and somebody comes and helps me eventually. But because she was with me, I was trying to look after her and thinking of her, what she wanted to do, and getting us on holiday and all that stuff. And I think I just got overwhelmed, and it was an autistic meltdown, probably. But it felt like a vertigo attack. So now I'm thinking, you know, is this psychological or is this physical? So sensory overload, how similar is that to Menieres? Well, I think the answer is very similar. Then you find out, I did research, remember I said research, I do research into this. Loads and loads of Menieres sufferers are also autistic. Famous example, Chris Packham. I think most people know Chris Packham, Nature presenter, both autistic and Menieres. His symptoms, by the way, are almost identical to mine. And then the hereditary nature of this, I look at it and, I mean, I wonder how many people in the room have had family members who've had similar problems to you. I mean, my grandfather, undoubtedly autistic. You know, he used to come to stay for a week and he'd say hello, and then he'd go off to the shed and mend the clock. And it would take a week for him to mend this clock. You know, and that was all he ever did. He never talked to us. He never talked to us. He just sat in the shed and mended the clock. This is autism. And he also had Menieres because he did the whole thing, the vertigo and falling over. And I mean, poor chap, I mean, no treatment, nothing, basically. I mean, that was how it was back then. So I think that overcoming adversity is part of my programming because I spent my life trying to figure out impossible situations. For me, most social interaction is impossible to understand. So I'm constantly trying to figure it out. And I generally do a pretty good job, I think, but you know, it's still an effort to do that. And I think that's programmed me to adopt the same approach in terms of dealing with the balance disorder. You know, I just keep working through it and keep being positive. I see my butler's calling. Right, I'm going to rattle through these because I think we are out of time, aren't we? Yeah, okay. So I'll just rattle through these quickly. This is the last slide. So these are some of the constraints, and I think I've covered most of them. So music can't really do it anymore, at least not in the way that I used to. So I've had to change the way I compose, and I've developed a whole project about composing differently, listening differently. Driving, I learned to drive in 1984. I drove for 1 month and gave up because I decided that I was a danger to the world. And because I got overwhelmed at junctions. Every junction I approached, I imagined every other junction attached to that junction. I'd visualised the whole road network, and then I realised that actually this lorry in front of me wanted me to do something like move or not. So I thought, I'll take public transport, which I've always done. Walking at night, head torch. Riding a bike, can't do that anymore, so I walk instead. Or if I want to ride a bike, I go to the gym, and they have stationary bikes, which are very good. Salty food, I use a health app to track all my salt intake. Loud restaurants, noise cancelling headphones, fluorescent lighting, dipple shades, allergies, personal air purifier, airports, the sunflower lanyard, and disability support. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Yes, hang on.
There's a phone question.
George.
It is right there. Andrew,
Yeah.
I've just been mesmerised at all the things you've said that I relate to every one. Like you, I've had Menieres about 19 years. Until the very end, I was going to ask you if you still drive. The biggest problem that I've had in my life with Menieres is the fact that I don't drive anymore. DVLA took my licence away, and my wife, bless her, has to drive me everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's a major thing. If you've always been a driver, you lose your independence that way.
Yeah.
But everything you've said, I relate to. It's just amazing. I've not spoken to anyone before who's had all of the things that you've put down there. Yeah.
I'll give you a hug later. No, I mean...
The sickness that I had that always came after an attack, it was so bad that I'm not quite doing this much now, but I used to carry a hypodermic and some medicine around with me and self-inject myself, because that's the only way I could stop the sickness.
Yeah.
But you've obviously had that as well.
Yeah.
It's amazing how...
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
We should talk.
And thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, it's a great pleasure, and I'm so glad that I was able to make that connection. Yeah.
Any questions on Facebook, Chloe? No questions on Facebook. Anybody else? Yes, hang on. I'll pass the microphone to you, I think.
Thank you. I could also relate to some of the things you were saying. The sunflower lanyards are available at Sainsbury's in Humberston Gate. You have to go to the customer services desk and ask for one, but they are available now.
That's fantastic, and I mean, personally, I don't go into supermarkets generally because I just find them overwhelming places. But I think for people who do, particularly people with balance disorders, I mean, the sunflower lanyard scheme's a godsend because you really do qualify for that assistance. And the staff I've found when I've been wearing them in airports have been really great. They really understand and are very helpful. So I recommend it, and it's the kind of scheme, it's a sort of use it or lose it thing. There's quite a lot of head of steam about this now. If Sainsbury's in Humberston Gate have picked it up, then it's obviously getting out there. And I think if people like us use that scheme, it will keep it going and benefit it. It's completely free and it's easy to use, so why not?
M&S do them as well.
Sorry?
M&S do them as well.
Right. Wow, great. God, I can't stand M&S. You'll notice that I'm dressed from M&S, but guess who does my shopping? It's not me. I used to go and buy shoes in M&S, and I could never understand why I had this great mountain of shoes that I'd worn once and never again. And it's because I'd go in, try on a pair of shoes, buy them immediately in order to get out as quickly as possible, and then couldn't wear them because they weren't comfortable, didn't fit properly. And that went on for years, and I just had this massive unused shoes, basically. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful, Andrew, really good. I do have one question myself, which I don't know if it's answerable. I as you know, went through Menieres 15 years ago. One of the biggest things for me was I never experienced it before, the fear of the end of my life. And I don't mean that physically, just the end of me doing what I used to do. Did you experience that, or in some ways does autism dampen that down, or did you experience the same anxieties?
I think I certainly experienced fear, but I don't think I've experienced it in quite the way that you're talking about, and I think that is to do probably with the autism. So I was quite amused by the fact that, this is going to sound crazy, the fact that the organ that was affected is shaped like a spiral. And my book on pataphysics, the symbol of pataphysics is a spiral. So, and it's an obscure French disease, and pataphysics is an obscure French literary, philosophical piece of nonsense, really. So I kind of was highly amused by it at the same time as fearful. So some of the time I was kind of scared, and some of the time I was just laughing at myself and at the kind of arbitrariness of the world.
No, very
if that
good.
makes sense.
Yeah, mine was fear. Before we finish with Facebook, which we'll be in a moment, I'd just like to say I love M&S. So thanks to it.
Are they sponsoring this?
And anyone who's into alternative medicines, it's fine by me. I'm just trying to balance things out.
Yeah, no, that's quite right. Remember my disclaimer, your moves may vary, and I really mean that. The fact that something doesn't work for me doesn't mean it won't work for you, you know.
Yeah, no, but honestly, what a fantastic voyage through your life, and thank you so much for sharing that, because I know even with or without autism, I'm not sure now whether I've got this autism or not, but with or without, it's been so insightful. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today. Thank you. So thanks, Facebook viewers. We'll catch up with you in the new year. Have a really great Christmas, and we hope a very well balanced new year. Thanks. Bye-bye.